Welcome to our YouTube channel. We are MCI Los Angeles and we're so glad you are here today.
Every week we're uploading content. What you're gonna see on our channel is stuff that's happening in our church. We'd love for you to subscribe, and we have messages that I believe are really gonna minister to your heart. Let's get into the latest message.
Well, my name is Valerith, and I have the honor to share the word with you. And I'm one of pastor's team of leaders. And you know, it's an honor to be here today, but I think more than that, it's a miracle. Because maybe you know me, maybe you've seen me giving announcements, maybe you've seen me pop in some of those social media videos, but what you haven't seen is what it cost me to actually be here today and being able to stand here in front of people. Because when I was in high school, actually for most of my life, I struggled with a lot of fear. And I remember that in high school, I was in the tennis team. I don't know if any of you here play tennis or know anything about tennis, but every year we would have a banquet with the team members, with their families. And the coach actually asked us to write a letter to a teacher that impacted us and that poured out into us. And so we picked our teachers, and then we had to read it in front of everyone, just like, you know, like right now. And, you know, so I'm there just picturing this image. I'm on my table with my family, my friends around me, and I remember the moment when my coach called my name. I was like, Valerith, Leyva. And I'm like, okay. So I grabbed my letter, and then I walked to the podium, go up the stairs, very similar like here. And I had my letter like this all the time. And so I put it down in the podium, and then I look up. And then I see everyone staring at me, just like right now, looking at me and wondering what I'm going to say. And in that moment, I froze. And it took me a couple of seconds to actually realize that I wasn't doing anything. And so I started reading the letter, but by this time I was already shaking. So I was holding the letter like this. I don't know if it has happened to you before, that you're shaking. And I started to read the few words, but it only took a couple of words. It took seconds for me to actually start crying. And not because I was moved, but, you know, some of you are laughing. You're getting the story. But it's because I was terrified. And everyone in the room, they read the room wrong because they started clapping. They started saying, oh, because they thought that I had a nice professor. And, you know, it got really awkward, even to the point that my teacher stood up and he went up to me and, you know, he tried to hug me. He tried to comfort me. And I'm like, yeah, it's not about you. And then my coach even came up, and, you know, he never showed love to anyone. And my friend Jose knows. He went to high school with me. So he knows that the coach that I had was tough. Everyone hated him because he was a tough one. And he loved Jose, if you know what I mean. And so he went up to me, and he's like, it's okay. You don't have to read the letter. You can go back to your seat. And so, okay, there I go with my family, and I'm just inviting you into this moment with me, because even when I was sitting, people still kept looking at me. And so I was there, I was like crying, trying to keep it together, and everyone was like, what's wrong with her? What's going on? And some saying, oh, you know, that's so sweet. But in that moment, I was traumatized. And as much as it's funny now, you know, now I can laugh about it, but it actually marked my life, because it was through that experience that I thought, I'm never going to be able to speak to a crowd. I'm never going to be able to present a project or say a speech in front of people, because that experience marked me. And yes, it was funny. You know, now it's funny, but during that time, it was so hard for me. And in that moment, I didn't just lose my words, but I lost my confidence. And all my life, like I was sharing in the beginning, I always had this sense of fear. And I remember that I was even afraid of ordering my food. I don't know if anyone relates, but maybe when you were younger. But I was even afraid of making calls. I had to make an appointment. I wanted my mom to do it for me. I'm like, Mom, you order for me. Mom, you call for me. Mom, you speak for me. Because I was so afraid. And it wasn't until God really placed an amazing man in our lives, whom I really honor today. I don't know if he's here, if he's going to be in the next service, but his name is Joel, and he's my stepdad. But he really took the role of a dad, and he pushed me out of my comfort zone, and he refused to let fear define me. And he said, no, I'm not going to make the calls for you. You have to do it yourself. I'm not going to speak for you. You have to speak for yourself. I'm not going to order your food for you. You have to do it for yourself. And in the moment, I hated it because I'm like, no, I want my own way. I'm a teenager. But now I see that God was using him to prepare me for this moment. Because silence feels safe, right? You see something happening and you choose to stay quiet. But it will suffocate your purpose. And when it comes to our faith, I feel like for many of us, it becomes worse. Where you don't know what to say to someone, to even encourage them. You don't know how to share the gospel. You are afraid that your friends are going to unfollow you or that your family is going to disown you because of your faith, because of what you believe. And I get that, because when I'm around non-believers, it could be easy to fall into what they're saying, into what they're watching. And so I know that the struggle is real, but you see, fear doesn't just make you quiet, but it convinces you that your voice doesn't matter. But yet, every time that God wanted to shift something in history, he used someone that was willing to speak, right? For those of you that have heard some of these stories, he used Moses to go and speak to Pharaoh. He used Jeremiah to speak to the people. He used Esther to speak to the king. Because God doesn't anoint silence. He anoints voices. And today he's calling you and me to break the silence. And that's the title that I have for you today. Break the silence. Say with me, break the silence. And today I want to talk to you about someone in the Bible that broke the silence in her generation. And her name is Esther. And Esther's story begins in the time of exile. She was a young Jewish girl that lived in the Persian Empire. And she was actually an orphan. She didn't have parents. Both of them died when she was very young. And she was adopted and pretty much raised by her cousin Mordecai. And one day, the king of Persia, Xerxes, say with me, Xerxes, wanted to look for a new queen. And out of the many beautiful young women in his empire, Esther was chosen. So just imagine, right, the contrast of, being an orphan, even an immigrant, because she was living somewhere where she is not from, and now living this luxurious life and having people that are serving her and having the best food and the best wardrobe. And how many of you are even like, yes, I want that lifestyle, right? She had all that I ever wanted. But she had one secret that she never told anyone. And she never told anyone that she was a Jewish, because Mordecai told her, don't tell them who you are. So she stayed quiet. And for a while, this quietness or this silence seemed fine until it wasn't. Because a man named Haman rose in power in this empire, in King Xerxes' empire, and he pretty much wanted everyone to bow down to him. But Mordecai refused. And when Haman found out that Mordecai was a Jew, he not only wanted to just hurt him, but he actually convinced the king to sign a law to kill every Jew in the empire. That means that a death decree was signed for men, women, children. All of them were going to be doomed. And now the only one that could do something was Esther. And I believe like this same death decree that was signed by, that Haman wanted to put for the Jews, to destroy them, I believe that it is the same plan that Satan has for this generation. A death decree over this generation. What Satan wants is for spiritual death to be in this generation, for confusion to be in this generation, for division, for hate, for sin. But I believe that most of all, what Satan wants to do is to get rid of God's people, to silence the church. And there's so many people in this generation that are so lost, that are so confused, that are living in addiction. People that don't know what their purpose is in life. And we have the honor of being in the campus ministry. And we went to a coffee shop which is close to UCLA. And there was a wall with a lot of sticky notes. And I don't remember exactly what you had to write. I was just reading the sticky notes. But it's either something that you've learned, and the other thing, what questions have you asked yourself? And I was reading how so many of them were asking themselves, am I doing the right thing? Is it worth waiting? How do I know that I am doing the right thing? How do I know when it's the right time to do something? Like, so many questions that they have. This generation is so confused. And I believe that this is a call for the church to rise up and to break with the silence, to say no more. Because I really want you guys to receive this message, because I want you to feel the heart of this generation, of what these young men and these youth are going through. Because you have the answer, and the solution is Jesus. And we read in Romans chapter 10, verse 14, but how can they call on him to save them unless, say with me, unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless, say with me, unless someone tells them? The gospel stays silent unless someone speaks. Hope remains hidden unless someone decides to open their mouth and share it. And the Lord wants us to be those that stand in the gap, those that pray for others, those that are there to lift our classmates, our friends, our co-workers. And today, whether this is your first time or you've been coming here for a while, this is the cry of God's heart. And it's a calling that is greater than your 9 to 5. It's greater than your career. It's a greater calling. It's a calling that is going to impact the kingdom. And it's eternal. And maybe right now as I'm speaking, because, the room's kind of quiet, if I can be honest. But maybe as I'm speaking, some of you are getting encouraged, right? And you're like, yes, no, Valerith, we got to break the silence. Like, I'm tired of the devil. Like, we're going to kick him and everything. But there's other people that I really relate to, that maybe they feel afraid. That they're listening to my words and they're like, did I come on the right Sunday to church? Perhaps it's hard for you to be confident in front of people. Because I wasn't confident in front of people. Maybe it's hard for you to put words together. That for some reason, I don't know if you guys can relate, but for some reason, everything sounds perfect. And everything comes together here. But when it comes to let it in out, it's like, and you're like, but I thought about it in my mind. It should have come out perfectly. But then it didn't. But first of all, I just want to say that I am a living testimony of what God can do to someone that say yes. And you're going to see the process of my life in this message as I'm going to be sharing. But me standing here today does not mean that I'm not afraid. And I want to show you something that I learned, which is my first point. And that is that fear is not your enemy. It's your opportunity. You know, when Mordecai begged Esther to go in front of the king and plead for her people, this is what Esther said in verse 11. Anyone who goes to the king without being called is doomed to die, unless, say unless, the king holds out his gold scepter. It is the word unless. Say with me, unless. Unless is such a small word. If you're looking at the screen, you can see the verse. Out of all the words that are there, unless is just like a very small fraction of the verse. But yet it changes the meaning of things. Because when I read it, that means that there's still hope. I mean, yeah, you could die, but unless the king holds out his gold scepter, you know, that means that there's still hope. So what do I mean by this? That means that there's still hope for your friend that is lost. There is hope for your family member. There is hope for this generation. Unless maybe your family seems too far gone, unless God steps into it. Maybe this generation seems lost, confused, unless an Esther rises up in intercession. And maybe you feel unqualified. And I'm the first one to raise my hand. Unless God uses the very thing that scares you the most. So there is hope. It is so interesting that as I was reading this Bible verse, it seemed to me that Esther wasn't saying it in this way of hope, like I just explained, that like, yeah, you know, you could die, but hey, there's hope. I feel like she didn't say it in that way. It was more like she was turning down Mordecai's petition. How can this generation be saved unless we rise like Esther did? In verse 14 of Esther 4, says, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? It is interesting because I've heard many people, maybe you are guilty of it, maybe I was for a while, and you say, oh, like I was born in the wrong era. I was meant to live in the 80s or in the 70s or wherever the peace sign came from, or like the 50s or 60s. Look, I don't even know. I'm like from 1998, okay? So, and you're like, no, I was meant to, because you know, the way that they dress, the music is really cool. So I was meant to born that in that era. Some of you say, oh, I was meant to be born in, who knows, Asia, Europe, Mexico, Latin American, or who knows where. But I want to tell you today that you were born in the right place. You were born in the right timing. It was not an accident. It was not a mistake. Why? Because God wanted you to represent Him in this generation, in this country, in this city, in this church, in this specific place. And He strategically created you for such a time as this because He knows what you're capable of. So many of us wonder, God, what are you going to do in my life? How can I be used by you when I have so many imperfections? But He's like, don't focus on that. I made you in this generation. You're not here by mistake. You are in the job that you are because I know that you're going to impact your coworkers. You are in the school that you are because I know that you're going to impact the campuses. You are in the family that you are. Maybe you are the only one that is a believer. But He said, I put you there because no one else believes. Only you. And I know what you're capable of. Maybe, you know, He also knows that you're barely trying to figure out this Jesus thing, but He knows that you can also call other people to join you into it. He intentionally has done all of that. So don't be afraid. Tell that to the person next to you. Don't be afraid. Now tell that to the other person next to you. Don't be afraid. You know that phrase is 365 times in the Bible. Because fear doesn't mean that you're failing, but it means that you're standing at the doorway of your destiny. And fear became Esther's opportunity, just like the point that I'm sharing. Because what it looked like the end of, for you guys is this side, what it looked like the end of her people's lives, their legacy, it was the beginning of her calling. The second point that I want to share is that faith is not the absence of fear. It's choosing obedience in spite of it. You know, Esther didn't wait until she felt brave. She wasn't like, okay, Mordecai, give me like a year or something until I feel ready, because I don't feel ready. I don't feel like going to the king right now. Like, I don't feel it. I don't feel ready. I don't want to do it. But she didn't do that. She called her people to a fast and pray for 3 days. And then she said, I will go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. There's no, that wasn't fearlessness. It wasn't that Esther was fearless. It was that she was faithful. And faith isn't a feeling that you wait for, that you're like, oh, when is faith going to come? I'm waiting for faith to come. Faith is never going to come. It's a choice that you actually make in trembling obedience. And maybe you're afraid to speak about your faith with your family or your friends because, again, maybe they are non-believers and you don't want them to be rejecting you, and you don't want them to, look down on you or unfriend you or unfollow you. Maybe you're afraid to launch that connect group because you might fail. You're afraid to fully surrender your life to God because maybe you're afraid that you will lose control. There's so many things that you can be afraid. I think all of us here have felt afraid. Many of us, and I think everyone actually has felt afraid. But everyone has a decision and makes the choice of what you're going to do with it. What are you going to do with that? God doesn't meet you before the steps of faith. He's not going to meet you before you tell your friends about Jesus. He's not going to be with you before you launch your connect group. He's going to be there after. And we see it here with Esther. Because fear doesn't disqualify you, but disobedience does. And feeling afraid cannot be an excuse for staying silent. It cannot be an excuse. Because when you choose to stay silent, you surrender to the enemy's agenda. And on the last day of Esther's fast, as we continue reading in this story, we read that Esther still had to go and walk into the king's room. It wasn't that God was with her before the fast, and it wasn't that God answered the prayer before she went into the king's room. No, she had to make a steps of faith. So she actually had to walk into the room where the king was. And then we're going to see what happens. But as she was walking there, I don't know about you, but when I read the Bible, I just imagine what they're thinking. I just imagine her walking towards the room and all of these thoughts coming into her mind. No, turn around. Turn around. You're going to lose your life. Turn around. He's going to kill you. Turn around. Everything that you're doing is worthless. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be going to church. You shouldn't open that connect group, because what if you fail? What if they reject you? Those thoughts came, and maybe anxiety was knocking on her door. But you know what? She walked anyway. And it could be that she was afraid, but she walked in obedience. And the moment that she stepped into the room, as we read the story, we see that the king extended his scepter. That proves that favor follows obedience. And some of you are one step away from getting God's favor, but faith has kept you silent. The third point that I have for you, and this is my last point, is that fear can awaken you. Can awaken your comfort or can awaken your calling. Mordecai said to Esther, if you remain silent at a time like this, deliverance will arise from somewhere else. But who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. So Esther had to choose between comfort and calling. She had to choose between staying comfortable in her palace, getting the best food, getting the servers, or stepping to her purpose. And let me tell you something. You can try. Well, let me word it this way. You can die trying to protect yourself. Being comfortable in your lifestyle. On Instagram, I'm here at the beach. I'm like, I bought these new Jordans, whatever brands. I don't even know about brands. Or you can live fulfilling your purpose. But you can't do both. And trust me when I say that fearless loses its power when there's purpose. Because I was afraid 30 minutes ago before stepping into the stage. But knowing that I have a purpose today, knowing that there's people out there that they need encouragement, that needed this word, is what made me be here and being able to come and still talk. Because purpose becomes greater than comfort. And comfort feels safe, and I know it. And I'm not saying, you're comfort, because I know it, and I'm living it. Comfort feels safe, but calling is significant. And there's been so many moments in my life where fear has tried to get a hold of my life over and over again. I'm not preaching this message because I'm fearless. I mean, I'm faithful, and I'm here, and I'm not perfect, and I'm struggling. This message is for me as well. But it's a decision that we have to make. And there's always going to be fear in your life, fear of speaking up for yourself, fear of sharing how you really feel, fear of standing up when you know something's wrong, fear of inviting people to church, fear of sharing your testimony. There's always going to be fear. That's why being fearless is not the absence of fear. But it's about responding to your purpose. And it's about knowing that greater is He who is in me than he who is in the world. And at the end of this story, we see this amazing beginning, that the king orders that Haman, which is the man that wanted to kill the Jews, is executed. And so the king allows Esther and Mordecai to rewrite a new decree to save the Jews. And so we see that Esther's obedience did not only save her, but it saved also an entire nation. And she realized then that the fact that she was in a palace, it wasn't coincidence. It was a purpose that God had for her. And many of us maybe have asked ourselves, why am I still in the same job? Like, I know that I have a career. I know that I could get a better job. Why am I in this family when no one believes? But He's saying, I placed you there for a purpose. Just like Esther was there in the palace, and maybe she was comfortable, but there was a moment where God said, okay, this is the moment to answer your calling. This is the moment where you get to answer to the purpose that I have for you. And it's the same for you, church. Whether it's at work, whether it's in the school, in the major that you're in, there's no place where you are right now that is just a coincidence. You have a purpose. You have a purpose in your family. You have a purpose at home. You have a purpose at school, in your job. You have a purpose here in this church. You have a purpose here in Los Angeles. You have a purpose, church. Your yes can shift a generation, just like what happened to Esther's. Your obedience can rescue a family. And what you have inside of you can change and transform someone's life. And I want to ask you to stand up. Please. Maybe you feel afraid to share about your faith, whether at school or in your job. Maybe it's hard for you to stand up for truth, specifically in this time. You're afraid to step into ministry because you feel like you're gonna fail. You are afraid of even speaking, even sharing how you feel. But remember that courage means that you don't feel afraid. It means that you are moving forward while feeling afraid. It's steps of faith that we have to do. And God is going to meet you after you take the steps of faith. He's not going to come before. And I know many times we're like, God, please give me favor before I talk to my friend, or he's not going to give you the confidence even, like maybe, we don't know how God works. But you're not going to feel ready. You're never going to feel ready. And I always tell that to my disciples. You're never going to feel ready to do anything. But you have to do it in faith. And you're going to see how God's favor is going to fall on you. So, church, today I want to encourage you to not stay silent. Speak to that coworker. Bring encouragement to that classmate. Join the campus ministry. But don't stay quiet. And maybe some of you say, oh, but I'm barely learning about Jesus. I'm barely starting my life with him. I'm barely starting to get to know him. That doesn't mean that you can be quiet. You can invite your friends and other people to join in the journey with you.